All right.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the Public Board for Sherwood Forest Hospitals. Very good to see so many of our colleagues. Can I first of all ask if we had any declarations of interest other than those that have previously been advised? And I'll run the record. I'm not aware of any others. Any apologies for absence? Again, I'm not aware of any. So moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of May, which we agreed, all of those are agreed. Okay, no dissenting. To matters arising and the action log. I think the action log is quite small again this time. Anything else? No? Okay, thank you. To the Chair's report, perhaps I can ask you to take that as read. I was particularly keen this time to raise the issue of the amount of money that is being donated and by members of the public. And it's not something that perhaps I'd been as well cited on previously until I became chair, and the opportunity to give thanks to all of those people who have donated money, either raised through local community activities and events or through donating money in lieu of flowers for the loss of one of their family or friends. And I think we are incredibly grateful as a community to all of our local population and supporters and patients for what they do, and also to our staff. So thank you very much for that. If there's any questions or issues that you'd like to raise? Not seeing anything, so perhaps I can move on then to the Chief Executive's report, and over to you, Richard.
Hi, good morning everyone. Lovely to see you all virtually. Just a few things from me. So clearly we continue to make progress from a COVID perspective with low numbers of patients with COVID in our organisation. I'll pass over to Simon Barton, the Chief Operating Officer, in a moment, just to give a brief update around the organisational position from a COVID perspective. As detailed, it was really pleasing and impressive that last week at Kingsmill Hospital we vaccinated our 100,000th patient, which I think was a huge undertaking with support from local partners, and clearly the vaccination centre at Kingsmill has played a really meaningful part in the wider rollout of the vaccine across the country. We're optimistic that we can continue to make progress around the recovery and the restoration of our services, and I think recovery and restoration will be a key theme that runs through the report today, not only in terms of restoring our services, but also thinking about the individual recovery for colleagues in the organisation. When Simon updates briefly on COVID, it'll also give us just a brief verbal update around the urgent treatment centre over at Newark Hospital. Just a few other things to draw to people's attention. In the second week in May, so between the 10th and the 14th of May, we recognised the NHS Equality, Diversity and Human Rights Week. It was important to play a role in that. And last week, the Midlands region, there's 7 NHS EI regions, the Midlands region launched its wider strategy for equality, diversity and inclusion. And myself and a number of other colleagues around the Sherwood board joined that, and we look forward to supporting that over the coming months and years. We've made a huge amount of progress from an EDI perspective, but there's still more for us to do. This week it is the National Volunteers Week. As we all know, our volunteers are an incredible part of the team at Sherwood, not only in terms of the provision of the care to our patients, but also that wider organisational culture and the support for colleagues who work, and we're very grateful for all of our volunteers. We know that many of them have had a difficult 12 months, and it's lovely to see volunteers back at Newark Hospital and Kingsmill Hospital, and we hope we'll soon have volunteers back at Mansfield Community Hospital. And then next week, beginning on Monday the 7th of June, it is National Carers Week. and this year we're focusing on making caring visible and valued, and we're rolling out the carers passport that I think from memory came to our trust board last month. The only thing I'll just conclude with, I update at the bottom of the report around freedom to speak up. We know that freedom to speak up is a really important marker not only of the culture in an organisation but the wider safety agenda. The National Freedom to Speak Up Index report has been running for 3 years now. There's 128 organisations back in 2019. Sherwood was 40th out of a Q Trust. 2020 it was 38th, and this year we were 8th. So we've made huge progress, but I still don't think we've fully got a culture where everyone feels able to speak up and where we fully respond to their views. So there's more work to do, but we have made a lot of progress from that important agenda over the last couple of years. So I'll pause there, ask anyone if they've got any questions before I hand over to Simon for a brief COVID update and Newark Urgent Treatment Centre.
I don't see any questions, Richard, so you can move on to Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's positive to see that COVID inpatient admissions remain low. There were 3 COVID inpatients within the hospitals at the moment, and so that's a really positive place to be in terms of the pressure on the hospital systems. Just a quick update on Newark. Colleagues will be aware of the history around the pandemic leading to the reduction in hours that Newark UTC was open for, and one temporary extension of that. We'll be now applying for a further temporary extension to that overnight closure at Newark for 6 months, because the current extension lasted to the end of June. We weren't able to do that previously due to PERDA and local elections, and so that piece of work which the CCGs will lead will have to take place over the next 3 to 4 weeks to ensure we have agreement to carry on with that. The workforce challenges at Newark have not changed in that period, and I think also we'll be working with the CCGs for them to lead some work with local stakeholders around more permanent options for Newark UTC over the next few months. Just wanted to raise that with colleagues, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Simon. Don't see any questions, comments at the moment. Richard, do you want to, are you handing straight over to Rob?
Yes, please, over to Rob now. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Claire. So I'll take the report or the update as read. A couple of key points to highlight. The first, the data's as of the 20th of May, so it doesn't capture the 100,000 vaccine that Richard's referred to, but notwithstanding that, the success of the hub continues, and the progress that's been made since December is certainly one of the leading lights of the vaccine programme across Nottinghamshire. We did achieve a further milestone in the past month, which was 90% of colleagues at Sherwood receiving their first dose. We've also been able to achieve 78% of colleagues receiving 2 doses, so some fantastic work there around ensuring our colleagues at Sherwood are appropriately supported and vaccinated against what has been a very difficult time. We've also achieved some really good progress with some of our vulnerable colleagues as well, and what's been recognised is the performance of the trust performed particularly well when we look at some regional benchmarking. So it's fair to say we're above kind of the regional average in regards to the performance that's been achieved around vaccinating our colleagues here at Sherwood. So a very positive message to provide.
Thank you, Rob, and it is a very positive message, and good to see the numbers that we have been able to vaccinate of our staff. Just looking again at those members of staff, particularly in the BME community, who at this point have not received a vaccination. Do we know why, perhaps in opportunities to engage in a discussion with those staff, what it is that they are makes them decide that they don't want to be vaccinated, or what those concerns might be? Are we getting a better understanding of that at the moment?
So there's been a number of events done in conjunction with the BME network group around trying to encourage colleagues, A, to have the opportunity to access the vaccine, but B, to understand what might prevent some of that. There is always a balance to be struck in this around appropriate support and engagement about alleviating fears, concerns. So some of the intelligence suggests it's around, fear of needles, kind of fear of the vaccine, and what we've been able to try and strike is a balance of where reassurance can be sought, whether that's on an individual basis with a member of the hospital hub or a professional that might be able to just alleviate some of those concerns. And it's a piece of work that's ongoing. It's great to see 90%, but the anticipation is to increase coverage as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. I think we do have a couple of questions. Andy Haynes.
Thank you, Claire. Rob, it's just a slightly tangential one, but I guess it's June and the summer will pass quickly. Are we planning the usual flu campaign? I suspect there's a risk that because we've seen little flu last year through lockdown, that people think that that's less important this year. I just wondered what the thinking is around that.
So the flu campaign is never stops, Andy. I think it's fair to say. So we've got a working group, a dedicated working group, that have already started planning for this season's campaign in regards to ensuring that we get as as uptake as we have done in similar years. So it's business as usual, but recognising the flu has not been as prevalent as it has been in previous years, we are just going to ensure that we make every attempt to increase the opportunity for colleagues to receive that vaccine.
Thank you. Manjeet.
Thank you, Rob. I firstly just wanted to say that looking at the National Guardian, the Freedom to Speak Up Index, we're the top performing acute trust in the Midlands, so it's really positive to see that we're on the right track with what we're doing, and congratulations to all the team there. My question was about our clinical psychologists that have been seconded from the Notts Healthcare Trust, and how that's coming along, or do we need to review it later yet?
So I was planning to touch on that during the soft item, so yeah. Happy to pick that up then if that was of benefit.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've not see any other questions. Richard, do you want to pick up again on anything in your report?
Thanks. I was going to go back just to the COVID vaccination. So as Rob was describing, whether you cut into it by age or ethnicity or clinical or non-clinical, shielding or on-site or across our 3 sites, I think for all of those categories to get above 85% and the majority at 90% is really impressive, especially when you look at the context of where other organisations are, and the reality is it's a vaccine that hasn't been around for longer than about 7 months now. There is more that we can do, and I think the key to it is the point that colleagues have made, which is about those careful conversations with people. And I know that Tabitha and others have been leading on conversations with colleagues around from minority communities. So I think we can probably increase the numbers slightly more, but I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that the work that Kim and Rob and Claire and many other people have done, whether it's vaccinating the wider community and certainly vaccinating colleagues at Sherwood, it's been really first class. So thank you to everybody involved.
Thank you. Dave, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm struggling a bit with my laptop, but I was just going to, just for board's information, just notify really that the COVID boost trial, the trial looking about the impact of giving citizens a booster is due to kick off next month nationally. This isn't something that we're involved in. It's in a series of I think it's 10 sites that are doing this, where they're testing the impact of all of the current available vaccines, irrespective of the vaccine that you've had previously, to see the impact of that. And that will then hopefully report probably in September or so is the idea, to then inform whether or not the booster program will roll out, and the timing of that, which may impact on Andy's comment earlier about the flu vaccination. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think Dave's just beat me to it. I was going to ask the same question, actually. Just wondered what our position is on the booster jabs that are potentially going to be required in the autumn, going in towards the winter, and whether we will maintain the facilities that we've got at Kingsmill at the moment to be able to do those if and as and when they're needed, and whether we can combine that with the flu jabs at the same time.
Dave, did you want to come back in?
So my understanding, Neil, and forgive me if I haven't, if I don't answer this because it's all a bit uncertain, but we've expressed an interest in maintaining the Kingsmill hub as being a site going into the next year, and that hasn't been clarified about where those sites will be. And I think what is awaited is the information from this trial to see whether there will be a booster program. It's only 3,000 patients. I think the COVID boost trial is going on, so that's the idea of a rapid review about what will happen, and that will inform what happens, and that will hopefully inform who gets that booster. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, clearly it's fairly uncertain at the moment as to what's going to happen, but I just wonder whether we're planning for that and prepared for it, and whether we can combine it with the flu vaccinations at the same time. So we can again make a real impact on that, as we did last year when we virtually achieved the target for flu vaccinations last year.
So I think, and Rob I'm sure will come in, but this year, almost certainly, we will be running a separate flu vaccination program and potentially a COVID booster program. I think going forward that may alter, but that will depend on availability and the evidence as to what we need. So we have our traditional flu vaccination program, which we'll be confident to roll. In terms of the additional workload, we will cope with that. I have no doubt. Rob, did you want to add anything to that?
I think the additional point to add is recognising that there is a little bit of uncertainty over the delivery of the programme, noting the points mentioned around the trial Dave referred to. What we are planning for, though, is the hospital hub here at Kingsmill to be an integral part in the delivery of a vaccine programme. If that's a mass programme of vaccine delivery, or if that's a booster programme, and clearly the role that the hub has played in supporting colleagues, citizens of Nottinghamshire to receive the vaccine, particularly some of our more vulnerable citizens, has been testimony to to the 100,000 vaccines that's been delivered. I think what is clearly emerging is some of the planning aspects which are yet to be determined, but certainly are ongoing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Rob, any other questions? No, I don't see any other. I know, Richard, you're just making a comment that the ask in 2021 was for flu was for 80% vaccination, and we achieved 80%. So we made good progress in the last year as well on that. Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on now to strategic priority 1, to provide outstanding care. And the first of that is the maternity update. So over to you, Julie.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So there are 2 papers here for the maternity update. The first one I'd like to draw your attention to is the Safety Champions update. Some key highlights from that are the Saving Babies' Lives Care Bundle, and this is a bundle of interventions to reduce perinatal morbidity and mortality, and we will declare full compliance with that later this month. So I think that's really good news, and it demonstrates good progress by the team. The second point that I'd like to draw your attention to is our work around continuity of carer. So nationally, we have been set a target to ensure that 35% of all women who have care with us receive continuity of care across the antenatal, interpartum, postnatal period from a small group of midwives. At the moment, we're achieving this for about 19%. It varies month on month depending on how many women have booked, but it ranges from about 19 up to 22%. We've had 2 teams operating for the last 18 months to deliver this piece of work, and what has become apparent is that the model that we've used for the 2 teams we have in place is not going to be, we won't be able to scale it up to create 2 further teams, which is what we need to achieve our ambition. We have a new consultant midwife called Gemma Boyd who has come in to lead this piece of work, and she is currently working with the community teams to develop a model that will help us achieve this ambition, but will also ensure work-life balance for the midwives. So the teams that we have in at the moment are providing a lot of on-calls a month, and it is interfering with work-life balance. So we have paused the rollout of the 3rd team, but remain committed to delivering the 35% target by the end of the financial year. The second bit I'd like to draw your attention to is nationally we need to be providing continuity of care for women from a BAME background, because all the national data shows that these women are more likely to have adverse outcomes. In the paper it says we are providing care for 61% of BAME women, and it has become apparent that that is not correct data. We're actually providing care for 25% of these women. So the team are currently working up a plan to help us improve that very quickly, and we're committed to doing that. The final bit I just want to draw your attention to is we've looked at the 2 national reports around perinatal morbidity and mortality, and there is an infographic attached, but essentially it shows that we haven't had any adverse outcome for women from a BAME background at Sherwood, which is very assuring for us. We continue our work with the Ocondon Submission, so we need to submit our evidence to demonstrate compliance with the Ocondon Recommendations by the middle of June. Just a reminder, this is a year programme, so no unit is expected to be fully compliant with those recommendations. It looks as though we will be compliant with all bar 2 of them, but we will update board on that in July. And we continue our progress with the NHS Resolution 10 safety actions. The Maternity Assurance Committee will meet on Monday to review the final actions that need signing off by Board of Directors in July, but it looks as though we will achieve all 10 safety actions, and we've had those reviewed by internal audit and also by another maternity vet.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
We've got some questions. So I'll start with Manjeet, please.
Thank you, Julie. A really helpful. Sorry, waiting for camera. Really helpful report, and it was really valuable seeing some of that targeting in some of our most socially deprived areas of high risk. My question was about how we were working with the system partners, and you've covered community and so on. So if I make that question more specific, I wondered how we may be working with the county council, their children's department, in terms of their children's and family centres that we have in areas, and also the voluntary sector in terms of that wider, on whether there are opportunities for more working in that area.
So I think there are huge opportunities for more working in that area. So I think predominantly a lot of our antenatal and postnatal clinics are based in GP surgeries, and the team are looking at how we can gain access to other community locations to support the continuity of carer work. I think there is more to do. In terms of voluntary sector, there are pockets where we work really well, so along the bereavement pathway, for example, and our infant feeding support. But I think there's more that we can do around antenatal education and birth planning as well. And I know that that's something that's high on Gemma's radar, who is the first midwife consultant at Sherwood.
Thank you.
Barbara.
Thanks, Julie. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the continuity of care. I know you said that the newly appointed consultant is doing a bit of a review, which is great. Do you have a timeline for that? Because it sounds like that's quite a crucial piece of work in terms of the maternity agenda, for when you anticipate the new model to be in place.
At the moment, Gemma is still doing the diagnostic phase of it, but we've, through the partnership with Shrewsbury and Telford, we've got access to an improvement partner up there who is a director of midwifery in the north, and he has achieved a 35% ambition already. So I've reached out to see if we can get some support from him as well, because I agree there's some urgency around this, particularly for our more vulnerable women. So I would hope that we can provide a bit more of an update in our July report for board as to where we are with that plan.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Just a question on the safety support programme. It's pleasing to see that most of the indicators are green, which is great news, but I just wanted to ask about the obstetric hemorrhage, which seemed to be a bit of an outlier. I appreciate the numbers are very low. Are there any underlying causes that we can identify, and can we do anything about that to improve it?
So each hemorrhage is reviewed through our triggers meeting, and the team are very clear that they haven't identified any lapses in care or themes, but what I have asked is that instead of looking at these as a single case, is that we do a collective thematic analysis of the hemorrhages that we've had over the last 3 months, just to see if there's anything that we see from looking at them in that different way. So that piece of work is due to begin, and I would imagine that we'll have some feedback on that by the next board. But at the moment, there's nothing that is coming out of it that we're worried about. I think we need to do this thematic analysis, and then the other thing we need to do is just look at the threshold and make sure that our threshold is right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Julie, was there anything else?
I was just going to draw out of the perinatal surveillance tool. So we've talked about PPH. We continue to have issues with the response rate for the friends and family test. We've got our volunteers and governors back on site now, so I think we've got an opportunity to use them in a different way to support ensuring that we do get a representative response rate, because at the moment the response rate is very low, and that is affecting the recommendation rate. And then the final bit just to highlight is around the stillbirth rate. So although it has come down, it remains above the threshold. And I talked to you last time about the COVID scanning protocol that was in place. We have now gone back to the normal scanning protocol, and I hope that that will bring that stillbirth rate back down to where we'd like it to be. And the training figure is in red at the moment, but that's because it's the new financial year. So we will see that improve month on month as the year progresses.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Julie. I don't think there were any other additional questions there, so thank you. Can I move on now then to strategic priority 2, promoting support health and wellbeing, and we've got a report of the Guardian of safe working. So David, I think it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So you've seen similar reports to this. I'll just draw a number of points to your attention. So this Guardian report is slightly different to the previous reports you've had for 2 reasons. One, that it is an extended period of time because Trust Board asked to delay the normal quarterly reports of this period covers November 20 to April 21, which is the period when we were undergoing COVID wave 2/3 at Sherwood Forest. And then secondly, we are between guardians of safe working. The previous guardian of safe working has resigned his position and is currently on a secondment, and so we've been out to advert, as described in the paper, to appoint a new guardian of safe working. So it may look slightly different from that point of view. We obviously continue to encourage exemption reporting where appropriate, and the paper describes 149 exception reports, and all but 10 of these relate to safe working hours. And of these reports, 97% have been closed. The majority of these reports occur across the medical division and also in the more inexperienced trainees. Those of you that add up the tables, the numbers in the tables like I do, will notice that actually rather than adding up to 149, it does add up to 159, and that's because the immediate patient safety issues, the 10 reports related to those, were dealt with immediately. Those were relatively low level patient safety issues, 9 from medicine and 1 from surgery, although it may be relevant to note that a number did relate to feelings those staffing levels were not safe. In terms of other aspects to bring up, we've tried to put some comparative data in this report because it's an extended report with previous reporting times, and you'll see that the exception reports seem to be increasing, which is something that we would take as a positive step to try and encourage that this is a tool that we can use to identify areas where we need to make progress. And if you look at the graph, which is rather bouncy in figure 3, it does possibly suggest that month on month exception reporting is increasing. As described, the majority of the issues are low level issues. We've undertaken no work schedule reviews and no fines have been issued. And then finally in the report, it does describe some of the exceptional medical staffing changes that we instituted as a result of the COVID waves, the pooled floor-based rotas, and recognising that whilst that increased the number of medical staff on the wards, it did have a significant impact on their training opportunities. And then at the same time, we also utilised our clinical fellows to support out of hours activity, and we also managed to establish our F1 trainees working nights. And then finally, in the report, one of the asks from a previous Guardian report was that we would track the actions for board, and we've put an update there with some RAG rating, which I hope you find helpful. So I'll stop there and happy to take questions.
Yes, Barbara.
Thanks, Dave. It was really a question to pick up on the point you made about more junior doctors having had their training affected by the impact of COVID for fairly, I can understand why that might be, but what support we and the education system is going to be giving them to help address that, because everyone's been working really hard during this, and it would be a pity if this had a longer term implication for their training and development.
Yeah, that's a really important point. So I think the first thing I'd say is it will have a long-term impact for their training, and that is increasingly being recognised, and it's a real concern to our trainees. What I've tried to do here at Sherwood is to try and move training and education to more to be considered front and centre of everything that we do. So in terms of the when we talk about our recovery programme, we also consider what the training implications of that will be, and there's a whole process that we're trying to go through to delve that. I'm just getting a bit of feedback. I don't know who's not on mute, but can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Yep. Okay. And what I've asked, Barbara, is I've asked our postgraduate medical education lead to come up with what you might describe as a training charter. We've signed up to the East Midlands Training Charter to support trainees, but we've asked them to come up with a charter that we can sort of commit to, that will ensure that we do put training back on our agenda and ensure we pay due mind to it, because it's really important for our trainees, clearly. In terms of my first comment, will it impact their training? So there's a whole raft of trainees, particularly surgical trainees, but not exclusively, who will not be able to progress and achieve their final completion. And the national bodies and the arm's length bodies are currently trying to understand the implications of that and what they can do about that. And that ranges from extending trainees training to try and achieve those competencies, to suggesting that trusts employ them in a more sub-consultant type role. We don't have detail on that, but it is a real problem. It's a national problem, and it's causing immense concern amongst the trainee fraternity, as you would imagine.
Thank you. Andy, oh, come back in.
Barbara, do you want to come back in?
No.
Okay, two questions, Dave. One, you've commented in the paper that the clinical fellows now have a rota. So do the clinical fellows get access to this Guardian of Safe Working in the way that deanery trainees would? And two, I suppose a follow on from Barbara's point, we know that some students graduated early to help with the COVID pandemic, and they'll now be at or past the end of their first year. So is that a group that we've got sight of and we're looking after?
So in terms of the Guardian of Safe Working, Andy, we are trying to harmonise the processes of whether they're trainees, whether they are non-trainee roles, whether they're F3, all of these variable roles, and you'll be aware that with the changes to this specialist grade, there's a requirement to provide similar sort of mechanisms for the SAS specialist doctors. So all of those. So we are trying to harmonise all that, and we are starting to collect that data. There is not the requirement for us to escalate and the fines, as you will be aware, but I think trying to treat them all equally is what I would push for, and we're starting to make progress for. Just repeat the second question, because I've forgotten that.
So the group of students that graduated early to help out with the COVID pandemic, they'll now sort of finish their F1 year. So we cited on that group, have we kept an eye on them?
In terms of, so many of them will have rotated through us. In terms of how they found that, or the impact that they found.
I suppose it's given this, and there's a lot of reference to safe hours in medicine. It's that group really, I suppose. Yes, they will have rotated out, but did we take some exit interviews with them? Do we know what their experience was? And have we handed any of that on to their subsequent rotation?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I haven't seen anything about that. We certainly didn't do that. We anticipated that the deanery would be undertaking that work, but I think that's a really good question to take back and ask HE. So I'll bring that back.
That's helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dave. Moving on now to the next strategic priority in maximising potential of our workforce. So Rob, I understand, over to you.
Thank you again, Chair. So obviously what I will do is take the paper as read, but what I want to spend the next few moments on is really celebrating some of the achievements around this agenda over the past 12 months. We've had some clearly dedicated focus with the introduction of the dedicated EDI lead, so Ali, and I know she's had an audience at this forum over the last few months, which is always encouraging to see. But what's been pertinent and what flows through the report is how we've been able to introduce an overarching strategy, which is then underpinned by a number of key kind of tasks, key opportunities, but key aspects of improvement. One of the things that shines through for the report is how we've been able to introduce a charter. That charter has now been adopted across the system as some good practice. We've refreshed training and refreshed the kind of the focus around how individuals can access some of this agenda. Really great to see around some of our REDS feedback around. We've seen as one of the top trusts for development opportunities, particularly in some of our ethnic minority communities. The report talks about the support to colleagues through COVID. We've already touched on some of the vaccine and how colleagues have been able to receive that, but it also recognises how the support's been available to individuals during a difficult time. Staff networks have shone, I think it's fair to say, and we've developed them further, particularly around dedicated time for chairs and kind of deputy chairs to be able to truly take some of those messages forward, but also that opportunity to engage and discuss. We installed an LGBT plus crossing, another highlight across the past 12 months. So, you know, lots of opportunities and lots of positive actions over that period of time. What I do want to recognise is that, you know, this is just a start, and clearly there is focus further over in the next 12 months, particularly around some of that inclusivity agenda, particularly making reference to kind of reducing race inequalities. And now in collaboration, not just with colleagues at Sherwood, colleagues across the system, but also colleagues regionally, how we can do this together in partnership. And you know, Richard mentioned it earlier about we have made some significant progress, but there's more to be done. And I think it's an exciting time that we're embarking, and clearly that momentum needs to be maintained. So happy to take any questions, but you know, a summary of the last 12 months have been very positive.
That's great. Thank you very much, Rob. Manjeet, question.
Thank you, Rob. A very detailed and very comprehensive report, and I just wanted to give assurance, seeing the EDI, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Cabinet papers and seeing some of the work of the networks, it really does reflect the extensive activity that's taking place. My key question looking forward and in terms of the learning was what would be useful is to see some sort of analysis of all the data, the feedback from the networks and the groups that have matured in terms of what are the future challenges and opportunities and how do they inform our actions? Because the report gives a lot of activities of what's been happening, and I think the key question for us now is, well, what's the impact? And also a little bit more about where are our key challenges and how does the evidence inform that in terms of moving forward for the future priorities?
Thank you, Manjeet. I would echo some of the points you've shared around that further focus that I described, and actually how we then can actually get tangible evidence and tangible data to say that focus has made impact. And clearly, as we move throughout the remainder of this year, that's an opportunity that we can start to share and capture through the committees that I know you're part of and have input to.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Richard, you had a comment you wanted to come in.
Oh, there we go, on mute. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Rob and others. I think, as you described, we have made a lot of progress with this, certainly over the last 12 months, the last couple of years, and I think it's a good example of some of the shared work that we're doing with NOTS Healthcare. I think when we talk about inclusion, though, from the conversations and the listening I've done with colleagues, I think there's three discrete sort of areas we need to be focusing on. Certainly, there's the bit about inclusion in terms of interactions between one colleague and another colleague at Sherwood, and I think we've made progress, but there's more work to do. There's a second point there about inclusion in terms of the way that the patients and the users of our services interact with colleagues. I think we've got some more work to do there. And the final bit is thinking about sort of being an anchor organisation, the role that we have in the wider system. I think we need to be very aware of some of the lived experiences that colleagues have outside of our organisation, and I think there's a lot more work to be doing there as well. But good progress, more to do.
Thank you, Richard. Rob, was there anything else you wanted to raise?
No.
Tim, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, for some unknown reason I can't get to where I stick my cue in the chat room thing. So it was just building on what Richard said and the anchor organisation and everything else. I think there is some good stuff here, but what I would like to see going forward as part of the strategy, what do we truly believe is a trajectory for us as Sherwood Forest and that anchor organisation, particularly around the number of people we employ with regards to those individuals. I personally don't like the term protected characteristics. I prefer distinctive, but I would like to see a trajectory somewhere to say, we want to try and target some improved numbers here. And what is it and how can we get there?
Thank you, Tim. I think what you're describing there is how we can, I'll go back to that focus reference, how we can truly make some focus over the next 12 months that has some tangible evidence, and the opportunity to look at, some marked kind of, I'll use the word kind of stretched opportunities, particularly around reference to those distinctive characteristics, gives us some purpose, which through the committee we can start to explore and ultimately make some traction against.
Yeah, and what I don't want it to do, Rob, is detract us from the amount of great work we've done, and also to just focus on one element and then move on and whatever. It's got to be a collective journey across the landscape, rather than one area of focus being crystallised and then we forget it and then go to another area of focus.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Manjeet, do you want to come in too? Manjeet, are you on mute? Manjeet's having some trouble with the IT. Do you want to, Manjeet, do you want to type your question into the box if you can?
Hi, I'm back.
Oh, yes,
I'm back. Yes, sorry, I caught the tail end of what Tim was discussing, and my further question, Rob, was we've seen some really good work with the networks and the maturity there over the last 2 years and how they've expanded. And I just wondered, compared to other organisations, in my experiences, naturally when you get that level of engagement, people invariably want to set up other networks as well. And I wondered whether there was an appetite for other types of networks. Sometimes I don't want to name which ones because it's not for us to dictate, but I just wondered whether there was any appetite coming back for any other types of networks building on the 3 we've got.
I think we always need to explore that, Manjeet, and I think we always need to ask ourselves the question around the balance of networks and the value they add. One bit that I'm particularly keen to focus and develop on is the extension of the networks collaboratively across the system. So we truly get the opportunity to build on collaborative working, across the 3 providers across Nottinghamshire, but also into social care, where we can truly start to understand some of that aspect of lived experience from a community perspective.
Thank you, Rob.
Richard, did you want to come back in on the point raised earlier?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking about Tim's point, which I'm in agreement with, and I was reflecting Care for Nots, which many of us will know is the Carers Academy representing everyone, is a good route for people who live across Nottinghamshire. to identify roles within health and care services. I think we've got 350 different or distinct roles across our organisation. So I think that is a good route to for us to have a think about Tim's point, because that is a good mechanism for identifying roles for our local population, certainly people with the characteristics that Tim described.
And Richard, just to build on that, sorry, just I meant Portland College. A lot of the work they do is working with young people to try and give them the life skills, but also career skills. And there's opportunities to partnership with maybe an organisation like that. And I understand they're going to expand and start to have a satellite facility in city centre of Nottingham.
Thank you. Did you say Portland College? Yes,
they're a huge college on our patch.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a look at that.
It's multiple impairments, physical and learning disability.
Thank you, Tim. That's really helpful. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Rob. Moving on now to strategic priority number 5 and achieving better value. Over to you, Richard. I think you're also going to talk to us on the ICP.
Yes, so in terms of the ICP, I'm presenting 3 reports here that all came to the public Mid-Nots Integrated Care Partnership Board in May and were approved. The first one is the Mid-Nots Integrated Care Partnership Update, where we detail progress against our 5 pairs of objectives in 2020 to 21. The second one is part of that. We wanted to identify specific, each month we focus on a specific piece of work that's been taking place across health and care in the voluntary sector. Last month we had an update on the work in the Bellamy housing estate, which we felt was of interest and importance. Not only will the Bellamy housing estate be a location where colleagues at Sherwood live, but it'll also be a location where a number of our patients and users of our services come from. So that was the second report. And then the third one was an update on the objectives for 2021-22. You can see on slide 2 of that we've used the same 8-point checklist as last year as a reference point. We felt it worked quite well last year to identify the objectives, therefore it made sense to do it for this year. And across our objectives, there's a combination of some pre-existing ones being rolled over, slight amendments to some, and then some new ones or additions where appropriate, and we felt that made sense. I just thought it might make sense or be useful to just to sort of reflect briefly on sort of the landscape that we're working in, some of the relative importance of what we're trying to do. So I firmly believe that our primary focus at Sherwood has to continue to be working in partnership with others, but as a statutory organisation. So at the moment we're focusing, as we've heard earlier, around elective and cancer care recovery and restoration, and the welfare and well-being of our colleagues in particular. That is our primary focus and continues to take a lot of time. I think that there's been a recent change over the last year or so. So our second area of focus of 3 is the Nottingham and Nottinghamshire integrated care system. I think that firmly now is the second area of focus, and that's quite clearly because NHS England and Improvement at a national and a regional level are routing their decision making through the integrated care system. So we have to play a key role in that. That's touching on elective, emergency care, workforce, capital and revenue. Clearly that's also taking up a lot of time, and then more recently there's been an add-on to that around the provider collaborative work that we are trying to shape with Nottingham University Hospitals and Notts Healthcare. And then finally we've got the Mid-Nottinghamshire Integrated Care Partnership. I personally think that we have made progress over the last year against that agenda. There is important work taking place in there, but as I have touched on previously, a lot of the work in the ICP is based around discretionary effort and is an add-on to people's day-to-day jobs, whether that's colleagues who work at Sherwood's or across primary care local authority, NHS or voluntary service. We at our board workshop last month, we had a series of conversations and just updating on those. So some actions that we took that I think tie into the integrated care partnership. I've made contact with Ben Bradley, who's a local MP and is now the leader of our county council, and we're arranging a meeting between Claire Ward, myself and Ben, not only to discuss the role of Sherwood, but the work we're trying to do across the county, which will now be of increased interest to him. I have a meeting later in the month with Cathy McLean, who's the chair of the Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Integrated Care System, again for a conversation about the work of the ICP, but also the work across Sherwood. And then last week I met with the LMC, the Local Medical Committee, for a conversation about the work that we want to continue directly with primary care. And we felt that if we continue to make progress with a reduction in COVID in our communities and restrictions are eased this summer, that both primary care and secondary care would be really interested in having a series of events coming together in the late summer and into autumn to build on some of the relationships that were firmly in place pre-COVID. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Richard. I don't see an indication. Oh, Barbara, I had a feeling you were going to ask for a question. I was waiting. Barbara.
Thanks, Richard. So I'm particularly interested in this, I think it was the third part of the set of papers, which was forward looking to the year ahead. And in light of what you've just said about the importance of the ICP and the agenda that we're, I'm not quite sure what's happened, but something's appeared on the screen. In light of the importance of the ICP, I just wondered whether you might have a view about how the objectives and the work plan for the year ahead might reflect more on some of the health services that might be improved if we did that collaboration a bit more. It's great to see a lot of the wider determinants of health being reflected in the set of ICP objectives, but I was thinking a bit about the health service aspects.
Thank you. Just before I answer, just to check, Barbara, when you say health services, are you talking through the NHS lens?
Yes, I am. On the basis that if we're saying the ICP is where integration of care is going to play a really big part, I just wondered how that might shape and inform the work plan for the year ahead.
It may be that we've gone too far down the opposite direction, and advice and thoughts on this are welcome. But what we have tried to do is ensure that the Mid-Nots ICP provides a balance between health, care and the voluntary service. Inevitably, the integrated care system work is predominantly, I think it is inevitable at the moment, across probably all of the ICSs. That's going to be the mechanism, in my mind at least, for predominantly delivering the health agenda. But in response to, because that's the conduit for the conversations with E&I, in response to that, we've tried to maintain a local focus more on the care agenda by weighting our conversations and our activity and our focus more to do with the work of the district councils, all three of them, the county council and the voluntary service. I think we're acutely aware that if the conversations lean too much more towards health, in particular secondary care, that discretionary effort that I referenced earlier may reduce, quite simply because people are so busy in their working life. So I will reflect on this and take back to colleagues that maybe there isn't the narrative and the sort of the red thread that runs through this about health isn't as clear as it could be. But I think we have to be careful that if it focuses on more on health, that may be to the detriment of some of the important conversations about care.
I suppose just Richard, in my mind, health services are a subset of health. So the ICP plan as it reads now covers the wider agenda around health. And I was just picking up on the opportunities from the ICP about health services that would really build on some of the opportunities you've already captured in this forward plan? But I'm happy to have a conversation offline if that's helpful.
That'd be great, thank you. And just before we move on, have you got a specific example that I can think about?
So in here, as an example, you've got last year there was some comment thinking about maternity, for instance. There's a reference in here about performance around breastfeeding and smoking. We know that's a big issue in maternity. Julie's papers already referenced that. So are there other things that we could do, for instance, working in Bellamy Estate with peer breastfeeders, or, you know, those sorts of things that help us deliver what we need to do and build on some of the developments that, for instance, are happening in Bellamy Road? That would seem to me to be a bit of a win-win for all.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good example and a valid point. I can see Julie's typing something. It'd be good to have that wider conversation, and we'll come back to that specific example as well, if that's okay.
Thank you, Manjeet.
Thank you again, Richard. You know, really comprehensive and good to see, you know, a lot of what's happening and being achieved. My point was same as what Barbara raised at the end, which was we're seeing some really good targeted work in Julie's areas on the maternity and continuing care, but particularly targeting in terms of population management some of our most socially deprived areas. And I wondered, first of all, Bellamy Estate seemed like a big opportunity for that co-production with communities, with the residents, and reaching out to them with all our services, and Barbara's touched upon a few. But I wondered whether there were any other priority neighbourhoods other than the Bellamy Estate, because the slides do refer to priority neighbourhoods, in terms of us really reaching those socially deprived areas in terms of the health inequalities.
Yes, we the breakout session following the Bellamy Estate presentation a couple of weeks ago in the public board, we broke into 4 different groups, and in each of them there were colleagues from healthcare, voluntary service, residents and users of our services, and we made that point. There's good work taking place in the Bellamy Estate, there'll be good work taking place elsewhere, but we need to have a much clearer understanding about mapping over the information available and identifying those areas that would most benefit from our collective effort. So we took a specific action in response to that, and I think it ties back to your point, Manji.
Thank you. Andy.
Yeah, it's a similar point there, so I'll be brief. So I think there is something about leveraging maximum intervention opportunities with things like Bellamy. So alcohol has to be an obvious issue that you might want to look at. There'll be something around diabetes. We know that diabetes education is variable across the patch. So are we happy that we've got those things in place that would help us, because they'd help with some of our demand profile, and they are helping with the impact long term on health. So I think it's finding that sweet spot. Richard, I understand absolutely what you said about the focus and the priorities, but our influence on our local population is perhaps bigger through the ICP than it may be through system, and it's finding that sweet spot and balance that's important, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Let's move on now to our staff story. And Rob, I know you're already online with us, but I think we've now been joined by Kim Kirk as well.
Just check, yeah, you've been managed to get through, Kim, before I make a start.
Morning.
Kim, sorry,
Morning,
Kim, can you turn your camera on if possible?
It's on.
Hello, Kim. Nice to see you.
Hello, Kim.
Better?
That's better.
Lovely.
Lovely. So it's a bit of a double act between me and Kim over the next kind of 10 minutes or so. Firstly, you know, just wanted to say thank you more than anything for this as an opportunity. You know, we've been part of something now since probably November of last year that's been, you know, just truly groundbreaking. It's a programme that you know, clearly just keeps giving, but I think the benefits of what's been achieved not only here at Sherwood but across Nottinghamshire is something that we're truly proud of. If you wanted to go on to the next slide for me, if possible. If we've got some technical issues. Danny, is there any chance we could go on to slide number 2 if possible?
Just bear with us, Rob. It's having a bit of a technical issue. Sorry, Rob, just be a second.
Rob, I assume you've got slides and you've got a video. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Claire. So just a few slides to talk through. Myself and Kim wanted to set the scene, to pardon the phrase, and then kind of tee up to a video that we've been able to capture of a number of colleagues that have supported the programme, but more importantly, support the programme here at Sherwood. Thank you for that, Danny. Apologies for the slight delay. So what I was starting to just describe was some of the background. So as I touched on, and a lot of you are familiar with this, was the hub here at Sherwood. We played an integral part in that vaccination programme across the system, making sure citizens, patients, loved ones received a vaccine. And we've seen some milestones, quite big milestones actually, over this period of time. So the first one, which we've often described as kind of the Valentine's Day milestone, because it fell on Valentine's Day, was making sure colleagues, citizens, patients within those first 4 categories under the JVCI guidance received the first dose. And what it's then become is predominantly a mass vaccination programme. Colleagues now, citizens, loved ones over the age of 30 can receive a vaccine, and it's been truly groundbreaking. And we've also been able to mobilise different vaccines during that time. But today's not about the kind of wider programme. Today's about what we've done here at Sherwood. And particularly what we've done at the hospital hub. And I'll pass over to, I guess, what's become a partner in crime over the last 6 months. But a lot of this could not have been achieved without Kim's leadership and commitment, passion, which I do hope comes out in the next few slides and the stories that we want to share. So could I have the next slide, Danny? That'd be brilliant.
Great. Thanks everyone, thanks for inviting me today. So our journey began on the 8th of December, it don't seem that long ago, and we started to vaccinate our colleagues and citizens with the Pfizer, and then in March we became a multiple vaccine hub, and that was in accordance with the JVCI guidance, and we was able to be part of the programme taking it further to the wider cohorts. And what we did see at the hub was a general want by our local communities for our really clinically vulnerable patients. It felt like they felt safer coming to hospital for that vaccine, so we'll really be able to support the programme, getting those numbers up and getting those people vaccinated. And you know, it's all credit to the staff that we were bringing together some really good experienced carers and nurses that were able to support them. you know, very frightened and scared about taking the vaccine. And more lately, that also was the case with the under 18s, with Pfizer being licensed, being the only vaccine licensed for those individuals, and pregnant ladies. So we've seen a lot of them coming directly from our clinic or from the community setting to take the vaccine at the hub, which has been brilliant. Can we have the next slide, Danny, please? So we've had lots of highlights, but just to tell you a few. So we achieved our 100,000 vaccine at the hub only last week, which was brilliant. 3 lads, you may have seen some press coverage. 3 brothers came, all under 30, who were taking the vaccine as they lived with their dad, who was immunosuppressed following a heart transplant. So that was a really high point for the hub and the staff. We've had our personal best, which was 1,140 vaccines in the hub back in May. And for anybody in December, I think the first day we did about 17 felt like we were so proud. So to do 1,140 was just unbelievable. And we wanted 2 locations nationally to do the 24-hour. And during those 2 sessions, we maxed out with 1,000 vaccines each time. Our workforce, it's been primarily provided by the mass vaccination team, but also we've had some redeployment from Sherwood Forest and Notts Healthcare, and that's proved to be invaluable. That cross-working partnership, you know, it really has been at its best. And most of the redeployed staff have now returned, but a few are staying on to hopefully stay until September, whilst we set up for the next phase, the phase 3 of the national vaccination programme. So we're just in a position now where regionally and nationally we're understanding a little bit more of that, but we do feel we need that core team to take this to the next stage, depending upon also is what is the ask for the booster programme. But what has been clear, and you know, it's been an absolute privilege to lead these people, coming from all kinds of backgrounds and introducing people to the NHS that probably would never have considered coming to work in an acute trust ever, is the people. You know, the people have made this, either taking the vaccine or working at a vaccination hub. So hopefully you'll enjoy our video to hear that in their own words.
I'm Ruth Harvey and I'm a vaccinator. Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm a seasonal and pandemic vaccinator.
My name is Andrew Crafts and I'm a pandemic and flu vaccinator.
Previous to this, I used to be cabin crew, but unfortunately got made redundant due to the pandemic. So I've completely turned my life around. Well, I've applied to do midwifery in September. I've got a place in university, but I've never had any experience in the NHS or a care environment, so I was looking for something I could do to help my university application, but also just during lockdown it really gave me a sense of doing something to help the situation we were in, really.
Before I was a delivery driver for Asda, you know, the internet shopping. I was doing that for 6 years before I finished last August, and then I applied for this job.
The team here at Kingsmill are so close, so friendly. I've never once felt like I wasn't from the healthcare background. It made me feel really like I'm part of the family here. Obviously I see lots of different people every day, but yeah, getting used to that, and I feel like I've really fitted in here.
It's great. I really enjoy it. It's helping people. It's getting the country back on its feet. It's moving things forward. It's just a massive plus for everybody, isn't it?
The team are a massive highlight. The sense of family when you come in, and really the patients as well. The patients, there's been so many, and they're all so grateful. They bring us in boxes of chocolates and bake for us, and you know, say how grateful they are. I love it. Yeah, I really enjoy it. Team are great. Just seeing all the people, and they're so grateful and happy when they come in for the vaccination. I've really enjoyed it. The people, it's really nice having like a group of people that you're here with all day, every day pretty much, and having that team bond. Also meeting all the different patients that we get through the door, get to know them a little bit, some more than others, but yeah, getting to know them, all their backgrounds as well.
I find myself here at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, quite possibly it'll be a step on to doing something else.
So I'm going to become a permanent vaccinator here at the hub and be part of the Sherwood Forest Hospital Trust permanently. And then I'm looking to do my registered nursing degree apprenticeship and hopefully follow that path. It's different from a corporate world because I think you're driven by something different. So in a corporate environment, it's driven by kind of profit and loss and making sure you can do everything as efficiently as possible, whereas you need to be efficient within NHS, but there's an element of care there. So if you're trying to give so many vaccines over the day, you need to make sure that you spend time with patients as an individual as well. And I think it's opened my eyes to making sure that you make each patient experience as good as it can be whilst doing the job that we need to do. And that's something that I've definitely learned from my colleagues within the team. But this has really confirmed that a care environment is where I want to be. It's definitely helped with my application.
Kim.
Hello.
That was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
And I think is testament to the way in which you and your colleagues have run that hub, so that people do feel they can just slot in and be part of the team. So back to you again, Kim.
So thank you for that. So just to know an update given to you all today and take assurance from our progress to date, and that the local deliver a key role for the hub and what we've achieved in the programme, and the impact and experience of the vaccination hub on colleagues' working life for future plans. You know, I think for staff, our staff and not self-care staff, their feedback has been that it's been a really positive part of COVID to be part of something that they felt they could see an end to, and being part of that has really helped them get through really difficult times. And I think that goes for us all. It's been a lifeline for us all in the hub. And I personally want to thank you as the board for the support you've given me. It's been unbelievable. I couldn't have wished for more. It has been a roller coaster as well. It is the programme that just keeps giving, but you know, it's been absolutely fantastic to be part of, and I want to continue to lead, so thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we've got some comments coming in from our executive directors colleagues, certainly supporting what they've seen today and saying how wonderful it is. But I think I might have a comment or question from Julie.
Thank you. I just want, Kim's very humble. Kim's our substantive head of patient experience, and I've had to ask people to step out of their comfort zone during COVID. But Kim actually volunteered to do this, and it's a complete change of role. So really, it's just kind of a huge thank you to Kim for stepping forward to do this and just acknowledging the phenomenal impact that she's had on the local community with the vaccination programme, but also looking at how she's inspiring the future generation of nurses and healthcare workers. So thank you, Kim, you're doing a fabulous job.
Thank you. I don't really get emotional, so I'm going to have to mute myself. Thank you. Thanks.
And those comments are absolutely echoed by the rest of the board. But I've got another comment from Simon who wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks. I just, as a student of operations, I just wanted to come in and say what a slick operation it is as well, and that's been really positive. And I particularly noticed from the time I had my first vaccination to the time I had my second vaccination, how the operation had changed and how slick it was, and I think that's really positive just from an operations perspective, how learning about process and improving process all the time. And I think everybody involved has done an incredible job around that. And you know, I'm sort of worried now that Rob might want to be the next chief operating officer of Sherwood Forest, but well done everyone. I think it's superb.
Richard.
Yeah, so comment first of all, and then a question. thank you, Kim and Rob and everyone else involved in this. What struck me is 100,000 people is a group of people of a size that I can't picture. It's absolutely ginormous, and the fact that you've given hope and optimism and belief to those individuals and to their families, I think is incredible, and something that you probably won't recognise. And as we touched on earlier on in the board agenda, nationally, I think the vaccination programme is going pretty well. So thank you to everyone at Show who's played their role in that. Given all the positivity, let's ask a question to keep you on your toes, Kim. Reflections on the last 7 months or so. It's gone really well, but if we could rewind and know on the 8th of December, whenever it was that we began, what we know now, what would we do differently?
I think from the beginning, there were so many variables in not knowing. We just had to get on with it. We could have pondered for such a long time about the things we didn't know. So, you know what, I don't know if we could have done anything different, to be honest, Richard, because it's just been so new to everybody. Perhaps, you know, the space, when I think about what we did do in that small period of time, in the small space that we had, but, you know, we were constantly moving forward with the unknown. Every day, you know, I can remember getting involved and it was staff who were vaccinating, and then 2 days later it was like, well, now you're vaccinating the under 80s and care home workers, which was great, but obviously a total different cohort of people to try and make sure it was safe and secure for those people coming onto the hospital side. I don't think we could have changed anything. I've learned a lot operationally, Simon, and having a compliment for you really is a compliment about that. But no, I don't think I would change, or we could have changed anything, because of the pace that things were moving constantly and the ask of the vaccination programme. It was changing hourly at some rates. So that's probably not a very good answer, but that's an honest answer.
Thanks, Kim. Perhaps I can just ask you about the future. You mentioned that we're looking at the under 18s, and that's obviously again a whole another cohort, as you've already just talked about, in terms of moving from staff to moving to those who are over 80 and the change of approach. So clearly a different approach if we're looking at under 18s. Is it anticipated that if the decision is given to under 18s, that will be run through our hub, or will be run through the school's vaccination programme, or do we not know that yet?
It's still not clear. We're currently working on a number of options around how we move forward with the sort of 12 to 16, 18-year-olds. With negotiations with our GP colleagues and the school teams. So one of the options is that we would support vaccinating the under 18s, but it's still yet to be decided.
Okay, thank you. And Dave, you wanted to come in?
I was just going to add a comment around that. So originally the suggestion with the younger groups was to hopefully use the single dose vaccine, because they're how can I say this? They stay still for less time, and a single dose might be advantageous. Of course, since all of the information around the various vaccines has increased, I think that the single dose vaccine, the current one, also has a adenovirus, modified adenovirus base, and so has the risk of thrombosis. So I think that won't be used in the under 18. So I think it's probably going to be Pfizer based. So that is likely to then utilise the hub, just because of the logistics of that. I don't know if Kim's got any other thoughts on that.
No, that's certainly been the case, hasn't it, Dave, with the under 18s that we've seen. I mean, we were probably the only hub for quite a few months that could offer the Pfizer, so county-wide. So we've certainly played a big part in that, and I imagine from what Dave's saying that would carry on when we open that cohort.
Okay, thank you. And I think Tim was just making the point that, you know, what we've learnt, how do we transfer those slick operational skills across to other areas of the trust? Whether that's actually a question probably for Rob or even for Simon rather than Kim.
You know, I think, you know, Tim, I think you make a valid point. Due to the nature of the programme, the fast-moving logistics of the programme, we've had to respond very quickly on occasion, and sometimes, you know, in a matter of hours. And I think what we do need to is reflect on what that journey's been like and transfer some of that learning. And you know, certainly an opportunity for myself and Simon and others just to explore some of that learning process over the last 6-7 months, because clearly there's a lot that we've embraced, which no doubt will be transferable into services that we provide across one of our 3 sites at Sherwood.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, and thank you, Kim, for joining us for this, and keep up the good work and encouraging more to come and work for Sherwood and come into health and care permanently. So thank you. We're going to take a bit of a break now for, I think, say let's do 10 minutes, and that will give us 5 minutes ahead of time on our general programme. But if we could be back here by 10:40, please, to get started on the single oversight framework. Thank you. Do we have everyone back?
Before we go live, can I just, so we've had a few problems with the IT and people not being able to be seen on camera. So can we go back on what we said earlier? So can we switch all cameras off until just before you're about to speak, please? And then that'll give comms a fighting chance of finding everybody. So if you switch them off, all except Claire, and then just switch it on just before you're about to speak. Hopefully that'll work better. Thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we ready to go live?
I think so, yes.
Yep. Okay. So welcome back, everybody, to Sherwood Forest Board. We've had a good session so far this morning, and I'd like to move now on to the operational discussions with the single oversight framework. So perhaps I can hand over to you, Richard, to take this section onwards.
Thank you. So the single oversight framework is the mechanism that I'm sure we all understand, where we review the different aspects of our governance, whether it is some of the workforce and OD metrics, quality, safety, patient experience, access, times of care, and financial performance. The reporting period is month 1, so April. We'll go through each of them in turn. The majority of the indicators will be familiar to people because they run from one year to another. But as we moved into the new financial year 2021-22, we took the opportunity to review some of the national guidance and make a couple of amendments. We took the opportunity to also look at some of the things that were of increasing importance in a world with COVID, and also as we move more towards system by default, some of that is beginning to be reflected in this as well. So initially hand over to Rob and Emma to take us through the people and culture indicators, and then over to Julie and Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. So I'd like to just really pull out a few areas to note in terms of our focus over the last number of weeks. The first one being our response to the staff survey results, and I shared them within previous forums and conversations. We're now actively progressing our You Said Together We Did action plan, and this is a collection of the actions that we are focusing on over the next 12 months to continue to improve our culture and overall delivery as an organisation. And some of those areas are relating to things around reducing violence and aggression, supporting greater and more diverse career conversations, and also with regards our ongoing health and well-being support to colleagues over the coming 12 months and beyond. So we are actively engaging across divisions, both clinical and corporate, with regards to their cultural development plans, and also those trust level priorities that we've determined are important to us, and what our colleagues have also told us are important that we continue to improve in those areas. So that's been a key focus, and that will continue over the coming months. The other area I'd like to recognise is also the work that's been undertaken with regards to enhancing our quality improvement, capability building, and also further strengthening our culture for improvement across Sherwood Forest hospitals. And a lot of work has been done with regards to reviewing that whole offer as an organisation for colleagues, so that we can continue to adopt, spread and implement improvement at all levels, whether it's basic levels of skills and capability, or whether it's more advanced support in some of our trust transformation programme. And we're also been looking at those opportunities that we can do at a place level and working closely across the system with those offers as well. So that's been quite a significant piece of work that we believe is going to strengthen our overall leadership and management capability. The final one I want to mention is a new pack which was launched for managers in May, beginning of May, and it's called Building Better Together, and it's particularly focused around the number of areas supporting colleagues' recovery, so a lot around rest and refresh, providing protected time and space for reflection and learning to help colleagues move forward in terms of recovery and restoration of services, but also in terms of their own mental and physical health needs. And that's been supported, and it's a collaborative pack that's been put together with clinical leads, with our OD, HR colleagues and our improvement colleagues, and that's being rolled out, and all teams are being encouraged throughout May up to September to use the tools and resources in there. And another example, some of that has been used particularly in areas around critical care and theatres. So those are some of the areas that I wanted to highlight and recognise for Sherwood. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Over to you,
Emma. Rob.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Chair. I really just wanted to kind of touch on some of the indicators that we're seeing across the organisation at the moment. So performance, I think it's fair to say, is returning to what we'd expect of normal levels, particularly around the absence and sickness indicator. I think clearly we've touched on, for a variety of forums, the importance of health and wellbeing, and how it'd be a key component in supporting individuals' recovery as we've gone through a very challenging 12 months. Notwithstanding all of that, we do appear to be performing better than our NHSI peer group around our wellbeing attendance figure. One of the pieces of work that's been integral to some of that is the psychological support. So I know, Manjit, you touched on this earlier, around some dedicated support that's gone into areas such as ED, ICU, some of our respiratory wards. Delighted to announce that resource is now funded through to the end of H1. We will be looking at that becoming some dedicated support as part of our core offer of health and wellbeing here at Sherwood, as we move into understanding what that ask will look like kind of in a post COVID era. We've also started to spread some of that offer into other areas across the trust, which no doubt would be of benefit. A few bits to also note. I think it's recognising some of our more traditional indicators are starting to get back to pre-COVID levels, which is encouraging to see, particularly around mandatory training, appraisals, etc. And a bit of a horizon scan, just to share with you all. We are starting to get to the latter stages of a new recruitment microsite, something we planned before COVID, but time had unfortunately got in the way of some of the developments of this, but that should be on board towards late summer, and that'll be a fantastic kind of platform for us to showcase opportunities, careers, etc. around here at Sherwood, along with some of the inequality stuff that I touched on. I think we've got a real opportunity to continue to build on that platform. So thank you, Claire. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And Neil, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Just interested in your comment. It says it's noted we've amended the thresholds to be more reflective of the reportable position. I'm not quite sure what that means, but you and I have had some discussions offline about targets, and I just wondered whether you could explain what the normalised positions are for the indicators, not now, but maybe to the committee later on, and how they've been stretched to give us some new targets for this year. And then the third part of it is how we actually benchmark those against other similar trusts. Perhaps could come back to the committee rather than discussing it now, but I think it's just a point to just to get a bit of clarification on, really.
And I think the point you make is a valid one, Neil, about how we particularly use the committee to talk about performance and how that performance benchmarks with comparable accredited trusts, how it benchmarks from the system and how it benchmarks in the region. And just echoing that conversation we had a few weeks ago, we've got a real opportunity for the committee to start to explore that in more depth.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we've got any further questions at the moment, so we can move on to the next stage of the SOF and the care. So over to you, Julie, I think.
Thank you. So I'm going to start and then Dave will conclude this section. So it looks a lot less red than it did last month, and that's because we've seen significant improvements around our infection control metrics. C. diff does remain a red rated KPI, but it is an improving position. So in the month of April, we had 4 hospital acquired C. diffs. We've sent the samples off for ribotyping and 2 have come back and they are different. So there's no evidence of cross-contamination there. The Deep Clean programme has recommenced. So last month I talked about the Deep Clean programme being suspended because we didn't have a decant ward. We're now doing a bay and a side room at a time, and that programme has recommenced, and we've UV'd all of the toilets across the organisation. We are working with the estates team to implement the 2021 cleaning standards, and they're making good progress with that. But in the meantime, the enhanced cleaning measures remain in place. And we are about to launch an infection prevention and control campaign across the organisation, just reminding people of the basics around infection prevention and control, not necessarily related to COVID, but around all of the other alert organisms as well. The other area I just want to draw your attention to is the friends and family test for the emergency department. So the recommendation was 91.9% this month, and that is a deterioration. It looks as though it is attributable to the response rate again, which is a bit of a recurring theme across all of our friends and family test surveys. So we are looking at the introduction of QR codes to see if that will support the paper-based surveys and the text-based surveys that we've got in place already. I'll just hand over to Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Not much to add, really. The VTE assessment is showing up as yellow. We've discussed this a number of times in board previously. We're unable to do our mop-up process where we send members of the team around to encourage the trainees to complete the assessments because of the COVID restrictions. Despite that, we're still maintaining what I would describe as a very, very good position in terms of a VTE completion. The solution to this, we anticipate, will be as a result of the EPMA, the electronic prescribing project, where we'll be able to ensure that to progress through that, you have to complete an assessment, and that will give us real-time data. Just on the EPMA programme, that I know we were just describing how successful the vaccination programme has been. Of course, we do need to just be mindful that other areas of the organisation have had to pause some of their activity to support the vaccination programme, and the EPMA project is really quite significantly off track as a result of some of the changes in personnel that we've had to make to support the vaccination programme. So it's just make board aware of that. So I'll stop there, and there are a number of questions, I think.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Jeet, you've got a question.
Thank you. I wanted to say that it's really useful to see the activity going on and how we're catching up. However, there is a huge backlog. And my question was particularly, I know we're getting that additional accelerator funding, additional funding, but how does that help, especially you know, bearing in mind limitations in terms of number of theatres or staff and so on?
I think Simon might want to come in for that one.
Yeah, so there's a layout of what the accelerator program is going to be spent on in the private board papers. The reasons for that is that some of it is related to commercial use of some commercial services who will support additional capacity within the organisation. But other areas of it will be obviously increasing productivity where safe to do so, continuing the positive work that we've done around virtual and the use of virtual where safe to do so. But we've got to still remember that we are constrained by infection control procedures, by social distancing and other areas which do continue to impact the number of patients that we can see. But in the private board papers, there's a clear table that shows what that money will be spent on, or Sherwood Forest's element of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Barbara.
So it's really good to see, as Julie's referenced earlier, that we have got far fewer reds this month than last. So well done to the team that have been working on this. Obviously, C. difficile still up there, but I'm hoping that you can provide me with some assurance that this is continuing to come down, Julie, because you must by now know what's gone on in May. Is it still normalising?
Yeah, so we had 4 in April and we've had 2 in May.
Right, so the downward trend is established. So the second thing really was about the change to the metrics or the indicators that are being used. So I appreciate that this is a monthly dashboard we've got in front of us, and it will be slightly different when it comes to quarterly. But it would be good to see more coming through as part of the stuff around effectiveness. It tends to be an area that doesn't quite get as much of a spotlight as the other 2 strands of the quality agenda. You might already have this in hand for the quarterly soft, but it was just a request, please. Otherwise, we're not giving a balanced picture of quality. We're giving it slightly putting emphasis on some aspects far more than others. Thank you.
Thank you. There are more effective measures in the quarterly, but Dave and I will have another look.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Barbara. We've had a number of conversations about the difficulty of assuring ourselves of effectiveness, and we're not alone as an organisation in this arena. But that's a really helpful prompt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not aware of any other questions at this point, so perhaps we can move on to the operational side, and I think it's over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few points to make before I get into the 3 key areas. So most of the changes to the SOF that you're now seeing are national standards to be delivered in half 1 or H1 as it is being known. Some of them are likely to change in H2, notably those related to emergency access. And obviously I sent a briefing note round to colleagues last week around some of those potential changes. In the H1 guidance, there were no specific emergency access standards, but we will continue to measure the 4-hour wait until something else is put in place, and we'll be trying to make sure that we achieve over 90% for that, whilst keeping our ED from being crowded. And then the third point that I wanted to raise around this was it should be noted that most of NHSI's interest will be at system level, and I think as we adjust the SOF into H2 and future years, we need to find a way of reflecting the Sherwood Forest aspect of performance, but also the system aspect of performance, given that we're now sitting in a wider sort of aspect. So I just wanted to raise those 3 points, Chair. I hope that's okay before I go into the areas. I'll start off with emergency access. So it continues to be pretty positive, and notably managing the overcrowding within the emergency department. Most of the winter capacity has now gone back to baseline, and we've coped pretty well with the Easter period and with the May bank holidays. So So that's been really positive. Activity is now pretty much back to pre-pandemic levels. There's obviously variability within that, but we're pretty much back to where we are before. There's one red indicator on that, which is the agreed number of patients who are medically safe for transfer, awaiting some sort of ongoing care. That's at about 8% of the bed base at the moment, and that's been escalated to the CEOs on a number of occasions. There's a new pathway that's due to start later this year, Discharge to Assess, which aims to take patients safely out into other environments to do their assessments rather than being assessed within the hospital. And there are a number of challenges, quite a few of them related to social care and their capacity and workforce constraints, some of which are COVID related, to be able to respond to this. That said, it's a lot better than it was before the pandemic, and I think we need to recognise that. So that standard of 22 is a real challenge, and I'm optimistic as a system we'll be able to get there, but I think it's going to take a bit of time. And then the other point that I wanted to mention was increase in surgical admissions. So the surgical pathway has seen a phenomenal increase in admissions over recent months, and some of that, and some feedback from the surgeons, is some of that is potentially patients who delayed attending during the lockdown periods, and their symptoms may have been medical initially, but now moving surgical. So we need to keep our eye on that, and surgery obviously are trying to restore quite a lot of their services during that period. But I think overall emergency access remains strong. Happy to take any questions on that. There's quite a few questions, but I don't know if they're related to that.
Okay, so let's start with Andy.
It's not related to emergency. So
okay,
it's a cancer-related question. So.
Okay, so
I'll keep going.
Keep going. I've got a couple of other questions, but let's do them all at the end, if that's all right.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I wasn't going to touch too much on cancer because there's a paper after this around cancer specifically, and our plans to achieve the backlog trajectories. But I will just touch on elective waiting lists. Obviously, as you understand, the H1 standards are about activity, not necessarily about waiting list shape or size. There's a briefing on private board's agenda around the waiting lists, which Helen will take us through later. But we had a decent month in terms of activity and exceeded the national standard in all areas during April, with the exception of elective inpatient theatres. And that was a planned reduction in activity, which was to give colleagues working across theatres and critical care some time for recovery, take some annual leave, to get theatres ready for doing more activity. So we expected to see that, and we're confident that that will bounce back during May. Manjeet mentioned the accelerator programmes. So our initial plans have been submitted around that, and as I say, the expenditure is shown within the planning paper that's in the next section. The current forecast is that should get us to 111%. That is a little bit short of like the national ask around this. There's still some work to do, but also recognising that's 25% higher than the national normal level. But clearly we need to deliver high levels of activity to ensure that a large number of patients are being treated. Where patients have got a clinical priority identified, patients are still being brought in within clinical priority, and particularly into the operative waiting list. And just picking up Andy's point from last time, we have started an analysis around the waiting list in terms of inequalities, to try and understand that a little bit further. So they're the key points that I wanted to pick up on elective waiting lists, and I'll take cancer under the cancer paper, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know we have some other questions. So, Graham, you wanted to come in?
Just switch on camera and get off mute. Thanks very much, Claire, and thanks very much, Simon. I just really wanted follow up a little bit in terms of the elective inpatient activity. Simon recognised where we were in terms of April. I think we were looking to get back more firmly on stream at about the 26th of April. And you made reference to May, but have we any early indicators about whether we're up to the kind of levels that we would expect to be?
Yeah, during May we'll hit all of these, all aspects across the board on activity. I think we'll be 90% overall across all our activity. So the inpatient work has significantly increased during May.
Great, no, that's really good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Manjeet.
Thank you, Simon. You've answered one of my questions earlier in your narrative, but my question was around the access. You said we were looking at the system support, and I just wondered how the system could support some of the access standards in terms of what we're doing and what more we could do.
So as part of the Accelerator programme, we're obviously working closely with Nottingham because they're our partners within that Accelerator programme. We've also picking specialties, ophthalmology being one, where we think we've got potential to work closer together and to potentially offer patients to have their treatment at either organisation should the waits be lower. I have to say that's not concluded yet, and there's quite a bit of work to do around that yet in terms of making sure that's clinically supported and the safe and right thing to do for those patients. And of course, patients have got to be given choice within that, and it will be their choice about whether they might want to travel to different providers. The other aspect of that is obviously we use the independent sector as well, and we have done for many years, and we'll continue to do that. And again, the independent sector is doing a hell of a lot of NHS work at the moment. And again, but that will be down to patients' choice, so they will have a choice whether they want to move providers or not. But what we would like to do is keep as many patients safely within Nottinghamshire that we can, and making sure they're not having to travel too far for treatment.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, and over to Neil now.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Just a question about the ERF. As you know, we've accrued for the, assuming we're going to hit the 70% level in the April accounts. I noticed in your analysis that we measure it at outpatient, day case and inpatient level. I just wondered whether we need to hit the threshold, 70% for April, for all three elements, or whether it's the weighted average across those three. That's the first question. The second question, which is related to it, is do we have assurance that the we're on target across the ICS? Because as I understand it, ERF is allocated across the ICS, not just for Sherwood.
So Paul might want to talk specifically about the ERF, but what I can say, Neil, is in terms of activity, we're managing activity on clinical priority, and so what we're trying to do is treat as many patients as we possibly can in line with their clinical priority, and we think that if we do that, we will then deliver the ERF aspects of that, because that's a sort of controllable thing, if you know what I mean. The ERF output of it isn't necessarily a controllable thing because it's financial and case mix adjusted, but Paul might want to flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. So for ERF, it's calculated at the tariff value based upon 1920 levels of tariff value of activity at the thresholds that we've been given, and that is across the system. So to answer specifically your question, Neil, it's probably the answer is it's a weighted average across the whole system for Nottinghamshire, and that's why there's a bit of a time lag, because we have to wait for the national data collection sausage machine to churn the handle, tell us what the tariff, convert the tariff values are, and then assess it at a system level. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I understand it now.
Okay, thank you. I think that's probably the extent of the questions on that section, Simon, so it might be useful to kind of move on possibly to the cancer piece. You're on mute, Simon.
Apologies. I'll just take the cancer paper in general. So there's a paper there which describes the work that we will be trying to do to try and improve and reduce the cancer backlog. So by March 22, the national standard is to have backlog levels over 62 days back to where they were in February 20. For Sherwood Forest, that's 45 patients. The level for the system is identified within the paper, so that's 212 patients by September. And then there are some trajectories in there which show our position with and without our NUH transfers in there, because certain aspects of that are influenceable and some of them are controllable. And we'll continue to work with Nottingham on those pathways. Reasons for putting that in is that I want us to work more closely together and work less around breach allocation between the two organisations, because that's not necessarily in the best interests of patients, but they're there to be seen. In obviously, cancer's always reported a month behind, so in March we had 101 patients who were in our backlog, and those 101 patients, I think our trajectory for April was 101, so we're sort of on track at the beginning, as you'd sort of expect, really. There's a number of actions which are in the plan, which are laid out sort of at tumour site level, but you can see there that lower GI is absolutely critical to this. And there's quite a lot of our accelerator programme is weighted towards diagnostics in lower GI, because that's 30% of the of our backlogs. And I think there's also a report coming next month to board which highlights the improvement work that Liz Gemmell, who's one of our upper GI surgeons, has been doing or leading around the lower GI pathway. And then of course there are a lot of risks to delivery of this, and demand is a key risk, and we have seen huge growth in cancer demand across different tumour sites over the past few months. There's time yet to see whether that is backlog coming in or whether that is a true increase in cancer demand. And we're working with David Ainsworth and primary care colleagues to make sure we get a clear understanding on whether we think this is going to continue, and also whether there might be some sort of concerns about primary care getting access to sort of urgent diagnostics and those sort of things, which we might have to try and meet in different ways. So backlog demand, demand in general is a big risk. Diagnostic capacity has always been a risk, and I've talked a lot to board around that. Again, the accelerator programme is very focused on bringing additional diagnostic capacity onto our sites in a safe way through the accelerator funding. And then the final element is obviously future COVID surges, should they happen, will be a considerable risk for this programme. But given where we are with the vaccine, we're confident that will be minimal and shouldn't interrupt our delivery of this. I think it's going to be very difficult to deliver this, but there's a clear trajectory in place and a number of actions, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments, and starting with Andy, probably Andy's question at the beginning.
Okay, so back to Andy.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks. So I'm trying to get my head around harm risk, Simon, and whether that is a discrete peak that we're going to see, or if it's a longer term peak, and whether we're geared up to see that. So I've seen data from other systems that shows there was a clear spike in conversion rate on 2-week weights in April, which has now dropped back to sort of pre-COVID levels. And I don't know whether we've got that data. It may be in the thing you're doing in July with the system, but do we know what our conversion rate has been? Have we seen an increase? Are we seeing late presentations in that? And has that decayed, or do we think we've still got that bump to come? So where's our system in terms of that conversion rate?
So we aren't seeing that significantly. The conversion rate is so small, though, as you'll be aware, Andy, that that actually small increases in it can really affect our capacity in a big way. So it only needs a little nudge in it to really knock off our capacity. So I think we do need to understand that a little bit better and understand it in patient numbers rather than necessarily in a rate. But we are seeing, so for example, on the breast pathway, we are seeing a significant increase in referrals to that pathway, but not necessarily more cancers coming through on it at this moment in time. So I think there's a bit more work to do with primary care in that. In terms of the capacity, you know, we in terms of diagnostic capacity, we had a real challenge before the pandemic came around that area. I think some of the endoscopy and extra imaging that will be coming through the accelerator program will help with some of that, but the diagnostic capacity will be a challenge. And one of the challenges that I've put out really to all our diagnostic services is how do you safely try and prioritise the sort of sickest patients or the patients who are at most risk within that. And one of the things that nationally is happening is to try and do a prioritisation process on our diagnostic patients, so they get into the system furthest, because I think our biggest opportunity around this is shifting capacity from routine work to cancer work plus the accelerator program. But that giving every patient a sort of P code on the diagnostic waiting list is a big piece of work and is going to take a bit of time. But I think we can do it. So I think there's more work to do around that. In terms of the operative capacity, should these patients need surgery within Sherwood Forest, that's easier for us to put on, and we've always sort of like perform relatively strongly on the time it takes from diagnosis to operative treatment at Sherwood, because we just convert the lists to cancer lists, and the surgeons and the anaesthetists are incredibly flexible around that. Critical care capacity is potentially a risk around some of that operative aspects, but I think the team are pretty flexible around that, and they certainly during May they've done an incredible job considering what they've been through. They've done an incredible job to make sure that as many sort of like cases have been able to be managed post-op by them. So I can probably outside of here give you a bit more detail around the conversion and what's happening around that, but I think we've got sort of capacity plans in place that will support some of what we're doing, but it is very dependent on what happens with that demand. And in breast, demand is at 30% of normal levels.
Yeah, so that's really important. So, and I guess part of my thinking was in the health inequalities bit. So if we haven't seen the bump and other systems have, is that because our bump is yet to come? And if so, does that mean particularly people from more health inequalities have suffered, and will we be able to track that and pick that up? So it's thinking about how we can bring that back, I think, for NEDs to see at some point and what route it comes through be quite important. Yeah, I think we can talk about I think probably worth a conversation offline about a bit more specifically about what you might be looking for around that. One of the things I would say is that there are a lot more, as I mentioned earlier, a lot more surgical emergencies coming in, and inevitably some of those patients will have cancer. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, Simon. It's that balance. So are we seeing more emergency presentations? We probably are, but we should be capturing that and understanding it and reflecting it.
That's helpful. Thank you. David, you want to come in?
Yes, I was just so it's an important point, Andy. We are capturing those patients that we think have had a delayed presentation as part of the COVID harm data, but what we're not, I don't think, reflecting that into is what does that mean about where they were on the waiting list, and what does that mean for the system, and all of those aspects. And I think joining up some of this, sifting through all of the information is going to take a period of time, and clarifying exactly what we should be focusing on and which particular tumour site or which particular category is difficult. We haven't got much national direction on that, but hopefully that will start to appear. What I would say is that there is ad hoc information suggesting that a number of cancers or tumour sites are presenting with later presentation, a later stage to clinics. We've certainly flagged this up as a system across our ICS clinical webinars, but we haven't got a mechanism of collating and capturing that into a formalised ICS report, which I think would be sort of helpful. I think that builds on what you were discussing with Simon, that maybe an offline conversation about how we get that and where that goes to would be really helpful.
Okay, thank you. Manjeet wanted to come in.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. It was really good to see in the report some of the focus on the productivity and the improvements, you know, considering all the pressure staff are under and the backlog we've got. To see that focus on speeding up pathways and productivity, it was really helpful. So thank you for a really informative report. My question was, you know, earlier on in the cover report, you mentioned that that there was a risk that routine care could be at risk if referrals carried on increasing. I just wondered if you could expand a little bit more on that.
So as described through the accelerator programme, we'll put more capacity on to be able to treat more patients. If that capacity can't meet the levels of cancer demand we've got, we will have to convert some routine capacity to cancer capacity to be able to keep up with that cancer work. In the sort of theory overall, that those patients being referred on the 2-week wait into any sort of cancer services could potentially be some of the sickest patients who are having to treat through non-emergency ways. So there'll be a conversion. Obviously, that conversion then has an impact for patients who are on the routine waiting list. And they may potentially have to wait longer around that. But with the accelerator going in, we should have more capacity available to meet both aspects of demand. But in the end, we're going to have to prioritise if we can't meet all the demand. And again, I'll come back to breast, a 30% increase in demand. I'm not sure many NHS organisations will be able to have flexible capacity to meet that. And particularly whilst maintaining social distancing and other infection control measures, which are absolutely necessary to stop the spread of COVID. So I think it's a delicate balance in trying to prioritise and treat the sickest patients first.
Recognise that balance, and good to hear the focus on the priority areas. Thank you, Simon.
So Simon, just picking up on your point about the 30% increase in breast cancer referrals, are we seeing that across our peers around either the East Midlands or indeed nationally, those sort of level of figures, or are we a bit of an outlier?
I haven't got the data on that, Claire. I'd have to check it and feed back to you outside of here. But I think certainly in Nottingham they're seeing perhaps not that high levels, but they're seeing increases in those areas.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was helpful to roll together your piece in the SOF and the cancer paper. Just felt that the right opportunity to do so. But we need now to just go back to the better value piece, and over to you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So financial position for April, and just start with a reminder that we're monitoring against a 6-month plan that we're calling H1, and that plan is as was approved at the board last month, is a break-even position over the 6 months. However, that doesn't manifest itself in a break-even position in each month of the 6, as our income is fixed through the block contract values, but our expenditure varies each month, and our expenditure is planned to be higher in the earlier months. Certainly in April, where we saw the last parts of our winter capacity, and where we expected the last sort of end of the previous COVID wave. Just focusing on April, there we are reporting a deficit of £600,000. That is £700,000 better than the plan. And that is because we spent less on COVID, not least because, as Rob reported earlier, our sickness absence rates have returned to near normal levels, and therefore our anticipated use of additional costs to cover for COVID related absences wasn't necessary. So we have lower COVID costs, and we've got some other areas of slippage in divisional positions. Just focusing on COVID-19 costs, they totaled 900,000 in April, and we spent on the vaccination programme, we spent 2.7 million, and we've accrued the income related to that. As we have reflected a couple of times already in the meeting, our elective activity was above the Sherwood Forest Elective Recovery Fund threshold. But as ERF is calculated at tariff value and on a system basis, we don't yet have that outturn, the actual outturn for April, so we've made a prudent estimate of the income in order to report at month 1, and we've included that prudent estimate at plan levels. Our forecast, such as it is after month 1, suggests we will achieve the break-even requirement for H1. Just touching on capital and cash. Cash holding is above plan by 800,000 at the end of April. That's reflective of the financial position being better than we thought it would be, and our capital expenditure is on plan at month 1. So happy to take any questions arising.
Okay. I'm not seeing any specific questions around finance at the moment, so perhaps I can thank you, Paul, and but I think Richard might like to come in on a comment. Richard.
Thank you. It wasn't about the finance in general, but just going to take the opportunity at the end of those the 4 domains across the soft just to sort of reflect on it. So what we try and achieve, and I think all organisations try and achieve, is the idea of a balanced portfolio, which is delivering safe care, looking after colleagues, delivering timely care, and doing it all within the financial parameters that we've agreed to. And I think, as we've heard through the that synopsis of the soft there, I think we've achieved that in month 1, and that's a good indicator of where we should expect to be, certainly in H1. I was just reflecting, I think, as we've touched on previously, we should feel proud about our response to COVID, but I personally think the next 12 months are going to be at least as challenging. And what we need to focus on are the aspects of, as we've heard, reinstating our services, the recovery of our waiting lists, looking after colleagues, ensuring that we're providing safe care whilst COVID will continue to be in our organisation and in the community for months and possibly years to come, and then doing that within the financial parameters that we've signed up to. So a good start to the year, but I think we do need to recognise quite how challenging the next 11 months are going to be.
I think that's a very helpful summary, Richard, of some of those challenges that the Trust and our staff and our patients are going to face, as you say, over coming months and sadly probably over coming years. So can I now move on to the next section of governance and to look at the Infection Prevention Control Board assurance framework, and it's over to you, Julie.
Thank you very much. So this has already been to the Quality Committee, but it's here for board oversight. Essentially, the board assurance framework for infection prevention and control has 121 key lines of inquiry within it, within 10 domains. We are compliant with all but 2 of those, and you'll see the detail of those, but they relate. The first one relates to risk assessment of all infections on admission, and we're looking for a digital solution to this, so we'll be using Nerve Centre to document this in the future. And the second one relates to recording a patient's COVID status when they're discharged. So we're very good at saying when they've had a positive result, not so good at saying when they've had a negative result. So we've got plans in place for those that involve IT solutions going forward, and some interim plans to improve compliance. I think the thing to draw out here is that the BAP has good oversight. So the incident control team receive a weekly report in relation to the COVID elements of this assurance framework, and the Infection Prevention and Control Committee see the BAF in full ahead of it going to the Quality Committee. Happy to take any questions that people might have.
Okay, I've not got an indication of anything there. I think it was a good presentation. Probably answered sort of the queries that board members had. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for that. Can we move on then to assurance from the subcommittees? So over to quality. Barbara, would you like to highlight anything?
Thanks, Chair. So there were three things we'd like to escalate and brought to the attention of the board. In fact, we touched on it already today. The sort of importance about the harms assessment, both from COVID directly and indirectly, but importantly, how we learn from that analysis and what we do differently because of that. So I think some further work that Dave and the clinical teams are doing on that particular front. Secondly, the vaccination programme, we've heard how successful that's been to date, which is really good. We are likely to have a wave 3 of the vaccination programme, and really this is an opportunity for the Trust to look again at how it manages the quality and safety issues that are currently all attributed to Sherwood Forest Trust, and that's basically because we've got the CQC registration for that programme, and as colleagues will know, we also employ the lion's share of the staff involved in that, so it's a good opportunity to look at that again as we move into wave 3 to make sure we've got that addressed. And then finally, we had quite a lengthy debate about the BAF, the 2 risks that are allocated to the Quality Committee, PR1 and PR2. And as a result of those discussions, we would propose to reduce the current exposure for those risks down to somewhat likely, therefore changing the overall score. So they're the main 3 things we wanted to pick up and escalate to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Julie or Dave, was there anything you wanted to come in respect of any of those areas?
Julie, did you want to go first?
No, you go.
I was just going to flesh out a bit about the vaccination and the risks. So we did discuss the exposure that the board was taking right at the start of the vaccination programme of Sherwood taking the CQC registration, and we had our first legal challenge around this, around a needle stick injury, and we were the named organisation. And just exploring the governance processes around that has been quite difficult, and whilst this is obviously it's very significant for the patient involved, but in terms of the risk to the organisation, it was relatively low level, but there is potential for there to be much more significant legal claims and exposure to the organisation. So we've involved our legal teams and the ICS system to just try and explore who should be the named organisation in these sort of instances, and the memorandum of understanding is being adjusted to reflect that. So whilst we have the CQC and the quality aspects, Notts Healthcare Trust hosts the programme on behalf of the ICS, and just sort of, as I say, just getting into that territory has been an important just reminder to us all. So I'll stop there and take any additional comments.
Perhaps Dave, just picking up on that, and what additional clarification have we taken around individuals protection who are vaccinators and how they're protected under the schemes that the NHS has introduced? because obviously you've got the organisational protections, legal protection, but you've also got individual vaccinators.
So in terms of that, so part of this difficulty has been because Sherwood is hosting and Rob may want to come in here, but because Sherwood is hosting the bank and the staffing attributes, in effect, we're taking responsibility for all of the staff who are vaccinating. Now, some of the members of the team who are vaccinated are our staff, and that's entirely reasonable, but the difficulty or the confusion has come, or discussion has come around people who are just filling bank shifts who actually don't really have any affiliation to Sherwood Forest and who should be taking the responsibility for their performance, if you like. And that's how the MOU has been adjusted. So my understanding is that if they are members of our substantive staff, then we will take the responsibility. But if they're members who are just filling bank shifts, then it will be the parent organisation who hosts them who will be taking responsibility for them. Rob, have I got that correct?
Just unmuting and putting my camera on, so apologies. Yeah, that is correct, Dave. I think the bit that I will extend is that we do have a number of colleagues that just hold a bank assignment, which they then form part of the wider Sherwood family, and they, we extend the same, support, privileges, wraparound, all of that to those individuals. That would be no different to a substantive member of staff. And I think what we've got to recognise that, inevitably, as traumatic as these occasions are, that we still wish for these individuals to access the right support, as if a substantive member of staff. So they've got equal access, which is something that we've worked and encouraged from the start of the programme.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. I don't think Julie had anything else that she wanted to come in, so I've got no other questions specifically around quality committee assurance. Can I move on to Finance Committee, and over to you, Neil?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. The committee met just for a short meeting just over a week ago, mainly to discuss the H1 plan. The H1 financial plan has now been submitted and it shows a break-even position both for Sherwood and across the ICS. And the workforce and activity plans are due to be submitted today, in fact, yeah, the 3rd of June. Just a couple of things to bring to the board's attention. Probably the biggest challenge the system's got in the next few years is it's got to bridge an £86 million gap in its finances, and there is a plan being developed to do that over the next 3 years, but that's going to be pretty challenging, and certainly Sherwood will need to play its part within that. And the second thing is that the FIP programme for the first half of this financial year within Sherwood is progressing well. We've got a forecast to deliver £7.2 million, which is 112% of the target. But the plan is based on a number of assumptions which we didn't have a chance to test thoroughly. So the committee will be seeking further assurance around those assumptions to make sure that is a realistic plan and we can deliver it in the first half, and that will take place at the next committee meeting. So I think that's really all I want to highlight, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Neil. I'm not seeing any questions. I think that was obviously a very helpful summary of the issues. Richard, did you want to come in on this section first?
Thanks. Yes, it was just in agreement with what Neil said. We've touched on this before, but just a reminder for all colleagues that clearly finance is one of those mechanisms where we're working very closely together with other organisations. And as Neil said, within Sherwood, we have got a key responsibility here, not only in terms of delivering the Sherwood financial position, but the wider system position that we are contributing to. I agree with Neil's assessment. I think we've made quite a bit of progress over the last couple of months in terms of our financial improvement programme. The first month or so has been promising, and we now need to build on that and deliver on the assumptions that Neil has described. In terms of that wider system working, there's two component parts. If you think of the overall financial number that we need to deliver, a third of that sits with plans that span all organisations. So, for example, I'm the executive lead for back office functions, and finding a way in which we can bring organisations together to share back office functions. And when you add all of that up, that delivers a third of the plan for this year. 2/3 of it, so the majority of it, still sits with individual organisations. And the message that Paul and I and others are conveying back into the system is, not only do we need to be focused on that first third, but actually we need to be spending more time sense checking the points that Neil made. Are all organisations delivering on their financial agreements? And I think if we're able to evidence the transparency in the delivery in month 1 and then Q1 and then H1, I think that gives us a good position to work with Stuart Point and others to try and bring the system together from a financial perspective.
Thank you very much, that's helpful. Okay, we're going to move on now to the committee terms of reference, and I think it's over to you, Shirley.
It is, yes, thank you, Claire. So this is the usual annual report. All committees of the board review their terms of reference and work plans each year, and also undertake a committee effectiveness review. There've been only one action identified, and that's through the People, Culture and Improvement Committee, and that will be completed during the year. However, the Quality Committee are undertaking a maturity matrix assessment, and this is on the back of what was developed for Audit Committee last year. So this was developed between 360 and the Governance Institute for Audit Committees. And then Neil Wilkinson, the Risk and Assurance Manager, has worked with 360 to develop and expand this for all committees. So Quality Committee are the first one to go through it. And so because they're working on that, they haven't undertaken their committee effectiveness this year, but they will report back through their normal Quality Committee report. And Finance and People and Culture and Improvement will also undertake the same exercise and report back in that way. So I've got nothing to raise to board, just really an awareness and assurance of what's happening within the committees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think there's been any other questions specifically around that, so we'll move on to the outstanding service, and we should have a video, I think, from Audiology.
Just as we're pulling the video up, I'll just remind colleagues and people about the idea of these outstanding services. So we take the opportunity to dive into one of our services or functions that sits within Sherwood or across the system, and it's really trying to shine a light on some of the outstanding practice that takes place within this organisation. Some of the criteria are clearly whether it's care or other functions delivered by teamwork, where you sort of sense a real enthusiasm and energy when you interact with the people. The team's focused on doing what's best for patients and the colleagues around them, and ideally we try and identify services that sometimes are the services that we don't talk about or spend sufficient time on. So we've hopefully got a good video coming up about audiology. Thank you.
Still having trouble with sound. Okay. When we get the sound up and running, just start it again, I think.
The lack of sound was a clever joke from the audiology team.
So So my name is James Harrison. I'm clinical lead for paediatric audiology, based in the audiology department. Been here 20 years. Audiology covers people's hearing care from birth to death. We start with newborn hearing screening, so babies receive a hearing screen at the bedside within a few days of birth, and we see children all the way up to the age of 18. We see adults from obviously 18 up until old age. We also support the ear, nose and throat department. We provide balance care, tinnitus care and hearing aids to people of all ages. So we've got 19 members of staff, ranging from most sort of bands within Gender for Change. We've got 3 full-time hearing screeners based in Maternity, and the rest of the staff are based in Clinic 8 here at Kingsmill and across at Newark Hospital as well. So we see around, at the minute, 65 patients a day. It's quite significantly reduced because of COVID. So that ranges from newborn babies to older people. Clinics that generally run a day are hearing aid appointments, so people come for hearing aid fitting or hearing aid reassessment. We do balance assessments, tinnitus counselling and management, diagnostic children, testing of children, and children's hearing aid appointments. Performing hearing tests. You can't really do that without seeing a patient, so it was balancing the need for that against what we were allowed to do as regards COVID restrictions. We were significantly reduced how many people we could have in a waiting area, so that really impacted on how we sort of developed and managed our clinics. So I think, yeah, we have quite a big impact on patients' social and communication abilities.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very good to see the work of the audiology team. So we move now on to our communications to the wider organisation. And our comms team, I suggest that certainly we should be putting something else on our staff story today, the real good success that's come from that, as well as referencing the audiology video that we've just seen. I'm happy to take other suggestions for what should be communicated, but I assume we might also want to pick up on the work that's coming out of the EDI report as well. Other suggestions from colleagues or comms?
If I may,
Yes,
Chair, if others agree, I think we can find a form of words to recognise that balanced start to the year across all of our domains. A balanced portfolio won't mean much to most people, but I think if we can find an appropriate form of words, there's due recognition for the organisation working with the partners there.
Okay. And I know that we've just had a suggestion in relation to highlighting infection prevention control as well as an important communication to our staff. Neil, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wonder whether we should measure mention what we're doing on the recovery programme. Clearly, it's a burning issue for a lot of people about how quickly we can get through the backlog of work, and whether we can actually give any indication of what we're doing to deliver that as fast as we safely can.
That's a very good point. Dave?
I think it follows on from that. I was just reflecting on the discussion we had about the impact of COVID on our medical trainees, and actually having a really strong statement from the Trust Board about how we value the work that they've done and then recognise the impact that it's had might be really supportive for that group.
That's good. And I know Julie is also suggesting that we highlight maternity progress with the Saving Baby Lives report as well. So I think that sounds like we've got quite a significant set of issues to communicate to the organisation. In terms of any other business, I'm not aware of any other business. I think that we've had a very good level of discussion today, despite the fact that we appear to have done so in very efficient time this morning. So the date of the next meeting is the 1st of July, and I would like to therefore declare the meeting closed, and do so by repeating the requirement of the resolution to move the closed session of the meeting in accordance with Section 1, Part 2, Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960. Members of the board are invited to resolve that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest. Can I thank everyone for attending this morning? Can I suggest to my colleagues that we perhaps meet a little earlier, given the time, and we do so at 12:30 to commence the private board session. Give you a little longer, and I look forward to the opportunity to chair the next meeting on the 1st of July. Thank you very much.